Part 59. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 581. Chapter 581 What it's like to be protected by your mother-in-law. Now that the emperor is keeping an eye on Huaishang, even Fan Qinjiao cannot contact his uncles secretly. So Fan Qinjiao knew nothing about the rights and wrongs in Huaishang. But Fan Qinjiao, who knew Bailey Fengming's thoughts, was not worried about anything. Early in the morning, the Zijiao mansion became busy. 2 weddings in just 1 month. Not to mention the Hua family, everyone was exhausted from the busy work, and even the guests were exhausted. But after hearing that the queen would be a guest today, the guests had to bite the bullet and come no matter how tired they were. Fortunately, the process of marrying the bride went smoothly. On the auspicious occasion of the wedding, Hua Fengming took the red silk in Wu Kaiozhuo's hand and entered the main hall. When the queen mother arrived, it was the time to pay her respects. The guests in the room, together with the elders of the Hua family and the Wu family, stood up and knelt down one after another, shouting, 1,000 years old, the queen. Queen Zhen 11 came here just to put on airs. She was helped by Lily and sat on the main seat. She smiled and asked everyone to stand up. She even waved to Fan Qinjiao beside her and asked her to stand beside her. Around. In front of everyone, all Queen Zhen 11 said was nothing more than some innocuous remarks. Even so, it still shocked everyone present. That is the queen. Now, in addition to the emperor, even concubine Yu, the most favored concubine in the palace, must bow and greet her when she sees him. Besides, there have been many ladies who married princes throughout the ages, but the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law has never been so close. Especially the concubines in the harem, no matter how high they are all used to being pampered. When you see the daughter-in-law of the younger generation, who is not aloof and has eyes on the top of your head. So now looking at the crown princess standing next to the queen, everyone should not be too envious. When the ceremony was completed, Wu Kaiozhuo was sent to the wedding room first. Hua Fengming wanted to stay in the front yard and have wine with the guests. Fan Qinjiao asked Mu Yan to go to the kitchen to fetch the meals that had been prepared early and deliver them to Wu Kaiozhuo, while he accompanied the queen to the side hall to rest first. As soon as she entered the door, Queen Zhen 11 took Fan Qinjiao and sat on the soft couch together. The majesty of the queen who was so arrogant just a second ago disappeared, leaving only a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. Lily saw it, snickered and stepped back to guard the door. Empress Zhen 11 took Fan Qinjiao's hand and said, I haven't left the palace for a long time, and now it feels a little uncomfortable to be looked at by everyone. Fan Qinjiao smiled and said, the queen is so majestic that she will attract the attention of thousands of people. Empress Zhen 11 quickly waved her hand, if you don't talk about this, why is there no movement from Fengming? Fan Qinjiao had already guessed the queen's intention, the emperor keeps a close eye on Huaishang, so it's hard to act rashly. After hearing this, Queen Zhen 11 knew that she was impatient, I don't know what that kid Fengming wants to do. I should finish my work and come back as soon as the emperor pays attention to him. Fan Qinjiao understood the queen's intention to strike while the iron is hot. But she said, last time the third prince suffered a defeat in Huaishang, if His Highness the Crown Prince goes too smoothly this time, it will arouse suspicion and gossip from others. Moreover, my daughter-in-law feels that the harder it is to get something, it will make people feel cherished even more. Bailey Fengming deliberately delayed Huaishang this time, which may not mean that he did not want the emperor to pay more attention to it. For the emperor, whatever he wants from a high place is just a matter of stretching out his hand. And if you want the emperor to pay more attention to you, you have to let the emperor taste the taste of something you don't want. Hearing these words, Queen Zhen 11 was in a trance for a moment. Yes, it seems that she is impatient. In the past, she had always remembered the principle of striking while the iron is hot, but she had forgotten that the best taste was what she couldn't get. It was as if the emperor had married her when he married her. She originally wanted the emperor to remember her desperate measures, but now it seemed that she was being taken advantage of by the emperor. Damn scumbag. When she thought about what had happened in the past, Queen Zhengzi felt very blocked. Even though my uncles have a large presence in Huaishang, they must be loyal to His Highness the Crown Prince, so please rest assured, Queen Mother, His Highness the Crown Prince will return safely, Fan Qinjiao said seriously. Queen Zhen 11 knew that the child had gone astray, so she smiled and said, "It's not that I don't believe in the Hua family, I just thought of the who once tricked me into the palace." Fan Qinjiao. Empress, you are, mighty. Seeing Fan Qinjiao's speechless look, Queen Zhen 11 smiled happily. Looking carefully at this little flower-like face, Queen Zhen 11 fell in love with it more and more. I think she was so worried about Feng Ming's marriage that all the ladies in the city stared at her all day long. Who would have thought that the person sitting next to her in the end was someone she had never thought of? This is probably because children and grandchildren will have their own blessings. The children are getting older, and she is getting older. After thinking about it, Queen Zhen 11 added, "In a few days, the third prince and the sixth prince will also take concubines." But how did I hear that the third prince took a daughter from the Fan family? Fan Qinjiao originally didn't want to upset the queen by saying it at this time, but the queen's method of finding out the information was too sharp, so she couldn't hide it any longer. "It's the daughter of the Fan family, Fan Swinning." Queen Zhengzi. What a magical thing. Fan Qinjiao said again. Fan Swinning pretended to be Yuning and approached the emperor. No matter what thoughts she had, she still stood with concubine Yu and the third prince. If something really happened to her, concubine Yu and the third prince would. The prince is afraid that he will not do well. After hearing this, there is something else that Queen Zhen 11 doesn't understand. I am afraid that I don't know what means Fan Swinning used to threaten concubine Yu and the third prince, so that they could escape from the palace. Now she continues to threaten the third prince, forcing him to marry her as a concubine. Even though Empress Zhen 11 felt it was a bit magical, she couldn't help but be happy. Concubine Yu's extraordinary virtues make her want to bring down the fairies from the sky to be her daughter-in-law. As a result, we are now forced to accept a shabby shoe with no family status. You can imagine how much concubine Yu had to vomit blood. Fan Qinjiao has never seen the queen so relieved and happy, and she also smiled from the bottom of her heart. After laughing enough, Queen Zhen 11 took Fan Qinjiao's hand and said, "You don't need to worry about things in the palace. The emperor has this palace to deal with it. You might as well take a good rest when you have time." Fan Qinjiao hurriedly said, "In front of the queen mother, the daughter-in-law dare not say she is tired." Queen Zhen 11 reached out and flicked her forehead. "You kid, why do you have to hold on in front of me? While I'm still angry, I have to protect you. Besides, you are my daughter-in-law. If I don't love you, who will you love? The good days for you and Feng Ming are still to come. You should always stay in good health to enjoy happiness, instead of fighting like this. My body is broken." Hearing these words, Fan Qinjiao wanted to feel the queen's pulse. As a result, Empress Zhen 11 held her hands with a smile and said, "I haven't received my grandson yet, so how can I be willing to leave so soon?" Fan Qinjiao stared blankly at the Empress's loving smile, feeling a little dazed. She had never been a daughter-in-law in her previous life, but only she understood the bitterness of it. Now, she is also a daughter-in-law, but she is really held in the palm of her hand, cherished and protected. This feeling is really fantastic. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 582. Chapter 582, I still have to take concubines after all. Queen Zhengzi waited until very late before she had to get on the carriage back to the palace. As soon as he entered Fenji Palace, he saw the somewhat impatient emperor waiting. This person is a rare visitor. Empress Zhengzi was both surprised and upset. But everyone has come, and Queen Zhengzi can't drive them out. I heard that concubine Yu was still ill. I wanted to wait until tomorrow to visit the emperor and concubine Yu in person at Yu Palace. However, I didn't expect that the emperor would come to Fenji Palace instead. It was my concubine's negligence. I had known that I would come back early. Bend your knees to say hello, with the magnanimity a mother should have in her tone. Emperor Yongchang stretched out his hand to pull the queen up, and then said, "The princess has any news about the prince?" Hearing this, Queen Zhen 11 felt sick to her stomach. Even a scumbag knows how to put on a show, but this dead pigskin doesn't even bother to put on a show. Queen Zhen 11 was not satisfied, so she naturally did not want the emperor to be satisfied. It sounds sad to say that although the crown princess was respectful to me, she was very indifferent when she mentioned the prince. I actually asked the crown princess if she had a prince news, but the crown princess only said that she was busy with her brother's marriage recently. Emperor Yongchang frowned when he heard this. If there was no news from the crown princess, then he would have no choice but to wait. Queen Zhen 11 felt happy when she saw the emperor's frown. Didn't you design the crown princess and the prince to monitor and suppress each other? Now, who do you show such bitter and resentful behavior? How can the daddy who was pulled out sit back? Even if you are the emperor. Even though Emperor Yongchang felt depressed, he also understood that these were all based on his calculations. It's just that he knew in his heart that even though the prince and the princess were superficially affectionate, he was really filial to the queen. In order to receive the news from the prince as soon as possible, Emperor Yongchang simply stayed in Fenji Palace. Queen Zhengzi. I'm afraid tonight will be a sleepless night. The so-called feelings have long been washed away in cruel washes. Now Queen Zhen 11 feels nothing but hatred for the man lying beside her pillow. But if the emperor wants to stay, Queen Zhengzi will still shed tears of gratitude on the surface. In this palace, keeping the emperor means keeping his favor. Feng Ming still has a long way to go with Xiao Qinjiao. Even if it is not for herself, she will continue to fight for the children. The news that the emperor stayed at Fenji Palace one after another quickly spread throughout the palace. Concubine Yu's anger can be imagined. But no matter how angry he was, he could only watch the emperor walking to Fenji Palace every day. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the third prince and the sixth prince to take concubines. In order to keep her son alive, concubine Yu stayed on the bed all day without getting up. In this way, the third prince should have taken the concubine first, but in the end, it was the sixth prince's concubine who entered first. After Fan Qinjiao learned the news, he made an appointment with Han Jingchen in the tea house. It's been a while since I last saw Han Jingchen and she still looks good, but behind her radiant look, there is a sense of aura and stability that has to settle in the hard work of reality. Han Jingchen didn't want Fan Qinjiao to worry about her, so she smiled and said, "You have to come in sooner or later anyway, so it's better to come in early so that I can accept the reality quickly." But the sixth prince also agreed to me, "Even if he is a concubine when you come in, you will never leave me alone." Fan Qinjiao didn't expect that the sixth prince would give a guarantee, but when he thought of Zhang Yulan's methods, he still whispered, "Zhang Yulan seems to be weak, but in fact he is full of calculations." Although the sixth prince loves you, he is afraid that someone will take advantage of it. Wait. You should be careful when your concubine comes in. Han Jingchen nodded, "Don't worry, I understand." Fan Qinjiao looked at Han Jingchen, still very worried. However, the prince's marriage to his concubine does not require extensive arrangements, and her current status makes it difficult for her to go there on that day. However, on the day when the sixth prince took his concubine, Fan Qinjiao ordered someone to give Han Jingchen a concentric knot that could relieve fatigue. However, this concentric knot was quite cumbersome to tie. Normally, the guests of Qingnangzai would be confused after purchasing it. It needs to be worn by Yu Luo in person. But when sending it to Han Jingchen, Fan Qinjiao deliberately did not let Yuoluo show up. Han Jingchen immediately understood what Fan Qinjiao meant and pulled the sixth prince to wear it for herself. Even if the sixth prince is not favored among his brothers, he is still a prince. How could he have done these things before? But seeing his wife's expectant look, he couldn't bear to let her down. Let's just tie it up. It depends on what the system is like. As a result, this series of events was completed 2 hours later. Han Jingchen felt heartbroken when she saw the sixth prince sweating profusely. She was about to say forget it, but she heard the maid outside the door arguing with someone. What's blocking the door now is Han Jingchen's dowry, so he will do his best to help his young lady. The sixth princess and the sixth prince are probably already asleep at this time, and it won't be too late to talk about anything tomorrow. It's just that the person sent by Zhang Yulan was also a dowry person. Thinking that his young lady was still guarding the empty room alone, not only did he not turn around and leave, but he even took a step forward and said, "I just heard the voice of the sixth prince. Why did my sister say that the sixth prince was sleeping? Even if my young lady is not as good as the sixth prince's concubine when she is married, the sixth prince's concubine should not be so doting on her. If the matter spreads, the sixth prince's concubine's reputation will be damaged." Having just entered the door, are you talking about things based on your reputation? What is this to be done? Not to mention the maid outside the door who was extremely angry. Even Han Jingchen's face in the room darkened. The sixth prince looked at his wife's gloomy face and felt a little sticky on his back. Hearing the quarrels between the maids outside the door, the sixth prince looked at his wife nonchalantly and said, "How about I go over and take a look first, and then come back later? How is it unbecoming to keep making noise like this?" Han Jingchen glanced over, her eyes red. "How did His Highness promise me a few days ago? Have you forgotten it? Or maybe His Highness feels that someone new has entered the door, and the old one like me is no longer pleasing to the eye or satisfactory. Is it valuable? What are you talking about?" The sixth prince felt that his wife had misunderstood him, so he wanted to explain, but seeing the tears rolling down his face, he swallowed all the words before he finished speaking. Since getting married, he has never seen his wife cry no matter what happened. Now seeing his wife crying, the sixth prince felt heartbroken, and felt even more guilty. After all, they were a couple who had been together for half a year. How could they not have feelings for each other? So the sixth prince was a little anxious. He walked over and wanted to help wipe the tears on his wife's face. "Why are you crying? Otherwise I won't go." Han Jingchen thought about being criticized by a servant, so she didn't get angry. She pushed the sixth prince away and said, "Your Highness, please don't wrong yourself for me. Since he meant it, Your Highness should go and have a look. Otherwise, I'm afraid I will really become a jealous woman that everyone calls for beatings." The sixth prince stumbled, his lower back hit the corner of the table hard, and the pain on his face was paled. Looking at his angry and crying wife, he still couldn't help asking guiltily, "So, should I go or not? Should I not go or should I go? If I want to fight or kill, you should give me the right word." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 583. Chapter 583. As the saying goes, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Han Jingchen looked at the way the sixth prince was in pain but didn't dare to scream, and no matter how upset he was, he couldn't get angry anymore. Seeing that the sixth prince was really in pain, she quickly pinned him down on the bed and took off his clothes to check the injury. When I saw the result, I was shocked. The lower back was swollen into a big lump, and it was so blue and purple that it looked like it was oozing. Han Jingchen didn't trust others, so she sent someone to find Fan Qinjiao at his mansion in the western suburbs that night. When Fan Kinjao found out about this, he couldn't help but chuckle. Unexpectedly, the sixth prince really took Han Jingchen to his heart, so she felt relieved. Fan Kinjao ordered Ninghan beside him, "Go and get the hyacinth ointment from the cabinet." Ning'an opened the cabinet and saw that there was also a blood activating and blood stasis removing ointment, but she didn't understand. "Slave, remember, the blood activating and blood stasis removing ointment is more effective, right?" Fan Kinjao smiled and said, "The effect is just too good, so I changed it to Huaxiang ointment." "Now my concubine has just entered the house, what can you do so quickly? It would be better to let the sixth prince cultivate more feelings while recuperating in Han Jingchen's yard. As the saying goes, a friend in need is a friend indeed." Ning'an nodded in understanding and hurriedly took the ointment and ran out of the door. Originally, Ning'an was worried that after her young lady got married, there would be an indispensable number of women in the prince's mansion. Especially when the prince really ascends the throne, how can the harem only have the young lady herself? But now it seems that she can rest assured. It's not that my lady doesn't know how to compete for favor, but she is disdainful. Fan Kinjao didn't know that Ning'an was thinking about the long term when he was sending a medicine. She was more concerned about what was happening on Fan Swinning's side. Concubine Yu is the most vindictive person, so in her previous life, she was always more careful and obedient every time she saw Concubine Yu. But even if she was submissive, she was still not as good as Concubine Yu. Fan Swinning deceived her about the gender of her child. Concubine Chiu Yu will probably remember her for the rest of her life. Concubine Yu deliberately dragged Bailey Rongs away this time, and it was obvious that she was giving Fan Swinning eye drops. That's okay, Concubine Yu can distract some of Bailey Rong's attention. In this way, Bailey Fengming's side will not be pushed too hard. But Fan Kinjao was calculating in his heart that Concubine Yu would always let go no matter how much she delayed. In the final analysis, Fan Swinning's intentions are not for show. Since he could threaten Bailey Rongs into marrying her, how could he really be at the mercy of Concubine Yu? Bailey Fengming is stalling for the time being, so Fan Kinjao naturally has to stabilize himself. And she was very happy to see Fan Swinning and Concubine Yu having fun. Thinking about her last life, Fan Swinning stepped on her to please Concubine Yu, and Concubine Yu was also extremely affectionate towards Fan Swinning. Even now, Fan Kinjao still remembers the scene when the three of them were sitting in the bedroom. Concubine Yu took Fan Swinning and had a lively chat, leaving her alone in the air. Fan Kinjao will certainly not forget this shame. So she really hoped that Fan Swinning would marry Bailey Rongs quickly, so that she could experience that feeling. Life seems to be going smoothly, but all the crises are rising and falling in the calm. The emperor still stayed at Fenji Palace every night. Hearing that Concubine Yu sent someone to invite her several times, she never came. Concubine Yu was unhappy, so naturally she couldn't make the people around her feel better, and she even held Bailey Rongs tightly and wouldn't let go. Of course Bailey Rongs was also troubled. There was no movement among the people sent by the emperor. Could it be that there was movement among his people? Fan Kinjao went to the palace in a low-key manner every day. Except for the diagnosis and treatment of the Prince of Janai Kingdom, he did not hear anything else. Anyway, the palace is bustling now, and even if she doesn't pry deliberately, the news can slip into her ears. Since he no longer had to deliver letters every day, Taxu slept in the yard for 3 full days before regaining his energy. Fan Kinjao thought about Chaiwu missing Ta Shui, so he simply took Ta Shui into the palace quietly. As a result, Chaiwu quietly went to play with the Prince of Janai Kingdom again. Fan Kinjao could only lead Ta Shui into the palace of the Prince of Janai Kingdom. Originally, Fan Kinjao wanted to take the initiative to tell the guards of Janai Kingdom. If Janai Kingdom did not agree, she would ask Texu to wait for Chaiwu in the East Palace. Unexpectedly, before Fan Kinjao could speak, the guard guarding the door said, "The regent has ordered that the crown princess of Janai Kingdom can enter with her pets." How could the regent of Janai know about this? Fan Kinjao was really curious. Even though she had brought Ta Shui with her, Ta Shui had been hiding in the dark. Even the palace guards had not noticed her along the way. How could she be known by the regent of Janai kingdom? The guard of the Janai kingdom said, the regent said that the swan Ni leopard only has one male and one female in its litter, and they are always brothers and sisters. Moreover, the swan Ni leopard itself has spirituality. In the past few days, I have seen the swan Ni leopard accompanying His Royal Highness. The swan Ni leopard always looks in one place, guessing that another one is about to come. Fan Kinjao. Is this the regent of Janai kingdom a fortune teller? But since the master agreed, Fan Kinjao didn't need to be polite anymore. Fan Kinjao didn't expect that Ta Shui would be ruder than her. When she entered the yard, she saw Ta Shui lying on the ground, letting the prince of Janai caress his belly comfortably. Fan Kinjao walked closer and heard the surprised voices of the little dumplings from Janai country one after another. I haven't seen you for a few days, why have you faded? But is it because you are too fat? But I think it's better for you to be fatter and whiter, it looks clean and feels comfortable to the touch. The prince of Janai kingdom was commenting and nodding his head with self-affirmation. As a result, Chaiwu, who had just woken up from somewhere, staggered out amid the critical voice of the prince of Janai kingdom. The crown prince of Janai kingdom. It seemed like I was greatly stimulated. Seeing Chaiwu and Taxi rolling into a ball in front of his eyes, the crown prince of Janai state belatedly looked at Fan Kinjao and asked, Sister Crown Princess, it turns out there are two of them. Fan Kinjao. If not. While Ta Shui and Chiwu were reminiscing about old times, Fan Kinjao pulled Janai Xiaochuanzi into the bedroom to check his pulse. The cultivation and treatment during this period of time have made this Tuanzi's heart disease very stable. It's just that this kind of heart disease was brought out from the mother's womb. Fan Kinjao can only guarantee that it will not relapse easily, but he cannot guarantee that the medicine can really cure the disease. The Prince of Janai Kingdom is optimistic. The Emperor said that it is enough for the princess sister to be able to do this. People can strive for it in this life, but they must not be wishful thinking. Fan Kinjao is really becoming more and more curious about the regent of Janai Kingdom. What kind of person is it that can live such a transparent life? So, the Crown Prince of Janai Kingdom is leaving soon. Once the disease is stabilized, there is no reason to stay. The Prince of Janai Kingdom shook his head. The Emperor said there is no rush, there are still some things that have not been done. Of course Fan Kinjao would not ask what it was, but she was quite curious as to what kind of thing could make the regent of Janai country put aside the country and government affairs for the time being. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 584. Chapter 584, I feel like vomiting after mentioning it. At the beginning of October, the first snow fell silently in Ziliang. The people who were still sleeping would see a white sky when they woke up. Early in the morning, the servants of the Hua family were busy cleaning the mansion and yard. Fan Kinjao paid his respects to his grandmother and saw Wu Kaiozeo leading the people in his yard to serve steaming red bean porridge to the servants in the house. When my aunt and sister-in-law met, they were extremely affectionate. Especially Wu Kaiozeo, who hurriedly came over, took Fan Kinjao's hand and complained, "Before we got married, I saw that you were quite close to me. How come you didn't come to see me once after we got married? What if? Just tell me what I didn't do well, can't I change it? This temperament is still as cheerful as ever." Fan Kinjao smiled and said, "My sister-in-law has just gotten married to my brother. It's a time to strengthen our relationship. How can I disturb her?" Wu Kaiozhuo's face turned red. "He's used to making fun of me." Fan Kinjao said, "I don't dare. I just hope that my sister-in-law can quickly conceive a son and a half-daughter, so that someone can call me aunt." Hearing this, The smile on Wu Qiuezuo's face became slightly unnatural. Originally, she and Hua Fengning had a good relationship after getting married, but recently, the eldest daughter-in-law, Ling Wei, often looked for Hua Fengning. Even if he didn't dare to come to the door openly, he still tried every means to secretly get someone to deliver a message to the yard. Fan Qinjiao can completely imagine the shameless spirit of his eldest sister-in-law, so it is not surprising. What does brother mean? In contrast, what the brother thinks is the most important. Wu Qiuezuo said softly, Fengning has been ignoring him, and I can't say much. I'm just worried now that if things continue like this, Fengning will have a soft heart sooner or later. Fan Qinjiao said, sister-in-law doesn't understand my brother. Since he hasn't said anything now, he won't in the future. The more kind and enthusiastic a person is, the more difficult it is to heal after being hurt. This is also the reason why Fan Qinjiao had to force his brother to see the faces of the Kong family and his eldest aunt. After hearing these words, Wu Qiuezuo finally felt more at ease. Even if she doesn't believe other people, she still has to believe her sister-in-law's words. Fan Qinjiao was chatting with Wu Qiuezuo when he saw Langya walking over in a hurry. Miss, I have your letter. Although Langya is with Fan Qinjiao, he doesn't often go out of the yard. Now that he came to report the letter in person, it shows the importance of the letter. Wu Qiuezuo hurriedly took the initiative and said, Qinjiao, if you have anything to do, go and do it first. I will continue to distribute red bean porridge. Fan Qinjiao nodded with a smile and walked toward his yard with Lang Yat. Fan Qinjiao waited until he was about to reach the courtyard before asking, is it a letter from the prince? Langya said, it's a letter from the uncle. Great uncle. This time, Fan Qinjiao was really surprised. Since his uncles became prominent in Huaishang, Fan Qinjiao has completely cut off correspondence. After all, if this matter is found out, the entire Hua family will be wiped out. Even with the smile in my arms, I have never sent a letter home. Now that he heard the letter from his uncle, Fan Qinjiao's heart skipped a beat and he quickly quickened his pace. At the same time, news finally came from the palace that the prince was safe. In the imperial study, Emperor Yongchang looked at the secret letter following the prince's eyeliner with an unclear expression. After the development of the third prince was all killed by the informants of the Bingma division, everyone was imprisoned in the mountain prison with the prince for 10 days. Just when everyone thought there was no way out, the prince was called out of the prison alone. It is no longer important how the prince negotiated with those tough bandits in Huaishang. What is important is that after the prince's negotiation, they were finally released from the mountain prison. As for the people who saw the light of day again, under the baptism of death and fear, the prince was their savior. Besides, no matter how the prince negotiates, the final result will be good anyway, and that's enough. Even though they are the emperor's spies, they still have to think about themselves. So in the letter to the emperor, I wrote it as dangerous as it was and as difficult as it was. After all, who works for the emperor other than to get promoted and make a fortune? As long as the emperor understands that they can get things done with the prince, they will be more likely to be promoted. Bailey Fengming also wanted to write a letter to the emperor. But he said nothing about the process. He only informed the emperor that the gangsters in Huaishang not only agreed to help the emperor look after the mine, but were also willing to contact the seller. Actually, Emperor Yongchang had already had murderous intentions towards the fierce bandits in Huaishang. Even if you can't send troops to suppress the bandits openly, you can still send people to attack them secretly. But now after reading the letter from the prince, he had to give up this decision. The mines in Huaishang were something he kept in his own pocket. It would be best if someone could help take care of them. The most important thing is that those gangsters are accustomed to doing other things and can use their hands to help slow down the iron ore. Not only will the money come faster, but if the incident really comes to light, they can also take the blame for him, the emperor. Even the prince said in the letter that these gangsters would have to pay 10% of their hard-earned money for each transaction, which made Emperor Yongchang a little unhappy. He is the emperor and the of Ziliang, how can anyone dare to make conditions with him? But considering the long-term interests, Emperor Yongchang still acquiesced. Just so that he would not be caught out when the Dongchuang incident happened, Bai Tu was asked to reply. Emperor Yongchang did not send anyone to deliver the message, but let someone release a carrier pigeon that night. Empress Zhengzi was extremely disgusted after receiving the news. Those who want to be a and also want to build a chastity arch are talking about people like the emperor. Private the iron ore and join forces with the gangsters for their own personal gain. It's simply selfish to the point of being shameless. Fortunately, those gangsters are from Hua family, otherwise how could the consequences be imagined? But knowing that the prince was safe, Queen Zhen XI's heart finally fell to the ground. And she finally didn't have to face the emperor's old and scummy face for a while. Sure enough, that night, the emperor stayed in another palace. After hearing this, Lily couldn't help but sigh, but couldn't say much. Empress Zhen XI, on the other hand, sneered indifferently, "Your Majesty is such a selfish person. When you are needed, you are like God. When you are not needed, you are not even on the ground." For the prince, when he is running around Huaishang, he only sees benefits and is indifferent to the life and death of the prince. If such a person really cares about me, I will feel scared. Lily wanted to say something else, but Queen Zhengzi quickly interrupted her with her hand. "Don't mention it." She felt like vomiting just by mentioning it. However, if you can't count on your own man, your daughter-in-law will still feel pain. That night, someone sent the news to the Zijiao mansion, hoping to make Fan Qinjiao happy too. But Fan Qinjiao, who was looking at the letter, couldn't laugh at all. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 585. Chapter 585 and Fan gets married. Since Bailey Fengming still had a criminal record with Fan Qinjiao, in order to ensure the authenticity of this matter, Bailey Fengming simply bothered the boss of the Hua family to write a peace letter to Fan Qinjiao. How could Fan Qinjiao not know that Bailey Fengming was looking for an opportunity for his uncles to talk to the Hua family? That man is like this, he always knows what she needs and dotes on her without any bottom line. But in the face of the cruel reality, all the warmth could not warm Fan Qinjiao's cold heart. Fan Qinjiao was not surprised that the emperor's informants were among the team heading to Huaishang this time. Originally, when these people went to Huaishang, they had no intention of picking up Bailey Fengming. It is reasonable for the emperor to want to send someone to secretly observe the prince's injury and attitude while taking Ji Hongliao away. After all, for that extremely selfish person, no matter how excessive he does, others can only bear it with a smile, and they will never be irresistible or angry. Even a trace of sadness is not worthy of having. But Fan Qinjiao didn't expect that Bailey Rongs would also tamper with the people going to the palace. Bailey Rongs is in the military and horse division, so it is normal for him to develop his power within it. But when the emperor sent people to the palace, the original purpose was to take Ji Hongliao away from Bailey Fengming. To put it bluntly, the emperor had been instigated by concubine Yu at that time and wanted to leave the prince alone in the palace. Despite this, Bailey Rongs still refused to give up and was not satisfied. He actually sent his own people to mix with the team, intending to poison Bailey Fengming who was in the palace. Xiao Yan personally checked the poison, and found that many of the medicinal materials did not come from the main city. What else does Fan Qinjiao not understand? I'm afraid that even Fan Xuning had a hand in the assassination of Bailey Fengming. Although the good news is that Bailey Fengming persuaded the emperor to give his uncles 1 cent of the profit from each iron ore purchase and sale. This is enough for the uncles to develop their own power in Huaishang. But Fan Qinjiao was still trembling uncontrollably while squeezing Xian's hand. Concubine Yu is insidious, and Bailey wrongs is even more insidious. The mother and son have endless tricks to deceive people. When Nanny Sue entered the door, she saw that the young lady had a bad look on her face. She hesitated for a long time before speaking softly, "Little lady, just now a message was sent from the Fan mansion, saying that it will be the Fan's home in a few days. The young lady is getting married, and the third prince's aunt invites the young lady to go to the third prince's residence to talk." Hearing this, Fan Kinjao actually smiled. She calls herself the third prince's aunt before she even comes to the door. Who gives her the face? Mama Sue also said, "It's better for me, young lady, to just ignore her." Fan Kinjao shook his head this time. Last time Zy Ling sent her a post in the name of the Fan family, of course she could ignore it. But this time Fan Swinning was smarter and directly borrowed the name of the third prince to invite her to visit. Although Fan Swinning is the little aunt in the third prince's house, even if she gets married, it is not her turn to come forward to accompany her, but now the third prince's party and the prince's party are in dire straits. If she does not come forward this time, she is afraid that the third prince and his party will still come forward. I don't know how to use this opportunity to make a fuss. By then, if Bailey Fengming really gets a reputation as an indifferent brother, that would be a real problem. Fan Kinjao had just gained a good impression of Bailey Fengming in front of the emperor, so of course he couldn't let others throw dirty water on him. Looking at the letter from his uncle in his hand again, Fan Kinjao became indifferent. Since Fan Swinning dared to look for him, she dared to go. It just so happened that she also had accounts to settle. Fan Kinjao turned around and called Ningtian in, "Go and send a message to the eldest princess." Ningtian was a little hesitant. "I'm afraid the eldest princess may not believe the young lady." Fan Kinjao smiled and said, "It doesn't matter whether she believes me or not, but there are some truths that she wants to see for herself." The words she said back then, whether the eldest princess believed it or not, had already planted seeds in her heart. Now is the time to witness a miracle, so how could the eldest princess not come? Whether it is the third princess or Fan Swinning, they either use or owe the eldest princess. How can they feel comfortable if they really see the eldest princess? Seeing them unhappy made Fan Kinjao happy. Yan Hanbei was really stunned for a long time when he received the message from Ninggan. Since she and the eldest prince were demoted to common people, both Fan Swinning and Pan Yulo seemed to have disappeared from the world. She had asked people to ask Pan Yulo several times before, but Pan Yulo ignored her all the time with the excuse of being busy. As for Fan Swinning, the person who used to wish to write to her every day can now hardly read a single word. Yan Hanbei looked down on Fan Kinjao, but now faced with Fan Kinjao's invitation, she still hesitated. The 5th day of October is the day Fan Swinning gets married. The weather in October was already bitterly cold, and not even a single person could be seen on the streets early in the morning. Since Fan Swinning is an aunt, she is not worthy of even the wedding process. Stepping out of the door at the so-called auspicious time, there was no one else around except my mother. Fan Xixiu has been busy trying to get Concubine Yu to get promoted and make a fortune recently. He knows that Concubine Yu has a bad impression of his granddaughter, so he will not get too close to her. As for Fan Yurong, he is a heartless person. He is too busy with women and girls, so how can he care about a daughter who works as an aunt for others? As for the previous preference and favor, it seems as if it never happened. Fan Swinning, under the watchful eyes of her mother, got on an inconspicuous sedan and arrived at the third prince's residence. No woman is willing to share her man with others, and Pan Yulu is no exception. He learned from the maid that Aunt Fan had arrived, so he immediately had the back door locked. On a very cold day, Fan Swinning huddled in the sedan chair, shivering from the cold, and hated Pan Yulu in her heart. But no matter how much she hated her, Pan Yulu was the legitimate third prince's concubine, so she didn't dare to have a direct conflict with her. Fan Swinning, whose lips were trembling, simply got off the sedan and stood at the back door. As long as Pan Yulu is not embarrassed, What does she have to fear? When Pan Yu found out, she was so angry that she broke the teacup. Even if there are few pedestrians on the street, there are always people passing by in twos and threes. If anyone really sees the third prince's aunt locked out of the door, she, the third prince's concubine, will be the first to lose her face. Almost gritting her teeth, Pan Yu asked her servants to open the door for Fan Swinning. Fan Swinning entered the main hall with the support of her dowry maid. Pan Yu, who had already been seated as the head wife, sat with her shoulders raised, waiting for Fan Swinning's tea. Fan Swinning felt a little disappointed when she saw that the seat where the third prince was supposed to sit was empty. Pan Yu deliberately told her, "Concubine Yu is not feeling well, so the third highness should go into the palace to accompany her." However, before the third highness left, she also told Aunt Fan to stay in her own yard after entering. Fan Swinning knelt on the ground unwillingly, took the teacup handed over by the maid and offered tea. "I offer tea to the third prince's concubine." The maid next to Pan Yu walked up to Pan Yu at the right time and whispered something. Pan Yu was completely attracted by the maid, and started chatting and laughing with her. Fan Swinning, who was kneeling on the ground, was forced to hold up the teacup, her face looking very ugly. Does she really think she can't tell that the third prince and concubine is deliberately trying to tease her? Looking at the proud smile on Yan Hanbei's face, Fan Swinning wanted to pour the tea on her face. If we talk about merit alone, who can compare with her? If she hadn't entered the palace for the third prince, how could the third prince's concubine be someone else's turn now? However, Fan Swinning is not afraid, so what if he shows off his power now? Wait for a while and see if she can still laugh. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 586. Chapter 586. I'll slap you in the face with someone else's hand. Just when Fan Swinning was being taught by Pan Yu, Fan Qinjiao arrived at the third prince's mansion. Fan Qinjiao had just stepped off the carriage when he saw Yan Hanbei walking over from the opposite street. Now that the eldest prince has been demoted to a commoner, he is still idle all day long. If Yan Hanbei's mother-in-law had not provided some relief for a long time, the family would probably be in trouble. How could Yan Hanbei afford a carriage now? Yan Hanbei came today, ready to be laughed at by Fan Qinjiao. But Fan Qinjiao just looked at her and said, "Coming." This indifferent tone and distant attitude are no different from the past. Yan Hanbei looked at Fan Qinjiao coldly. "I know you are extremely happy now, so why bother pretending?" Fan Qinjiao raised his eyebrows. "If I really want to see your joke, why bother to pick a date? Now you and the eldest prince are the biggest joke." Yan Hanbei. Sure enough, Fan Qinjiao is still as annoying as ever, choking people to death without repaying his life. Yan Hanbei gritted his teeth and said, "I don't believe you would be so kind as to let me come with you." Fan Qinjiao held up her skirt and walked up the steps in front of the third prince's residence. "You are right, but I did not ask you to come here just to laugh at you, but to use you to make others unhappy." Whether it is Fan Swinning or Pan Yu, they all owe Yan Hanbei. Now that Yan Hanbo is here, what is the difference between him and a creditor? Why would Fan Qinjiao not do something like this that can make his enemies upset with little effort? But Yan Hanbei couldn't figure this out no matter how much he thought about it. Fan Qinjiao did not want to explain any more and handed the post in his hand to the concierge. When the gatekeeper saw that the princess was coming, he hurriedly ran into the yard to report her. Fan Swinning's Pan Yu was still hanging in the main hall when I heard the waiter hurriedly come to report, to the third prince, "The princess is here, but she is outside." Pan Yu thought she heard something wrong at first. "Who are you talking about? Who is here?" The boy hurriedly handed over the post. When Pan Yu saw the post, She was so angry that she wanted to slap Fan Swinning twice. What a bitch, she dared to call herself the third prince's aunt before she even entered the door, and even posted a message to the crown princess. But now Fan Kinjao was outside the door. Even if Panula wanted to fight, she could only temporarily suppress the anger in her heart and hurriedly ask the servant to invite him in. Seeing this, Fan Swinning pretended to be surprised and asked with red eyes, "Is it my sister who is here?" "But my sister is here." Panula didn't know what the relationship between Fan Kinjao and Fan Swinning was. Seeing Fan Swinning like this, he couldn't let her continue to kneel. He took the tea hastily and asked her to stand behind him. Fan Swinning seemed to be standing behind me obediently, but the corners of her lips could not stop rising. So what if she becomes the third prince's aunt? Fan Kinjao, who had been in love with the third prince all her life in her previous life, could not even get close to him in this life. She just wanted Fan Kinjao to see with his own eyes that the third prince still liked her. And she could even take the opportunity to act like a sister with Fan Kinjao in front of the third prince and concubine. In this case, let's see if the third prince's concubine will dare to embarrass her in the future. Panula looked at Fan Swinning's proud look and couldn't hold back her anger. Even if Fan Swinning sent the post to Fan Kinjao in the name of the third prince, Fan Kinjao had to come because he was worried about the relationship between the prince and the third prince, but in her case, Fan Kinjao went overboard. Since it was a transgression, Panula had the confidence to raise an army to investigate the crime. She would like to ask her questions carefully later. The crown princess came with such a big fanfare, but she came to demonstrate for her. Fan Swinning looked at Panula's suddenly hardened waist and knew that Panula might have thought of some idea to embarrass Fan Kinjao. But Fan Swinning didn't care at all. In other words, she was really hoping that Panula would give Fan Kinjao some color. Fan Swinning called Fan Kinjao here just to use Fan Kinjao to gain a foothold in the third prince's residence. And after using it, whether Fan Kinjao is dead or alive, what does it have to do with her? If Panula really had that ability and could really trample Fan Kinjao under her feet, Fan Swinning would be happy to watch. In the main hall, both of them were waiting with their own plans. Not long after, I saw Fan Kinjao walking over with his servants leading the way. The moment he saw Fan Kinjao, Fan Swinning subconsciously rushed to meet him, and Panula was also ready to launch an attack to investigate. But as Fan Kinjao's figure became clearer, the two of them widened their eyes in shock. Fan Kinjao is right to be here. Who is the one following Fan Kinjao? Why is it so familiar? Looking carefully at it again. The eldest princess? Yan Hanbei. Fan Swinning stopped as soon as she stepped out. Panula's open mouth also closed. Whether it is Fan Swinning or Panula, looking at Yan Hanbei stepping into the threshold is like a dream. But if this is a dream, can you please wake them up quickly? Fan Kinjao couldn't help but sneer in his heart when he looked at the messy appearance of the two of them. Don't do bad things during the day, and don't be afraid of ghosts knocking on your door in the middle of the night. Looking at the expressions of these two people, it can be seen that they have done a lot of bad things. Yan Hanbei walked all the way. His heart felt as if he had been thrown into the spring water in the cold winter and had been frozen for a while. Since she had an accident with the eldest prince, Panula had sent someone to comfort her at first, but as time went by, the number of visits became less and less. Yan Hanbei still remembers the last time, when the people sent by Panula told her that because of the eldest prince's matter, it was now difficult for the third prince to deal with it, and the third prince's concubine was even more depressed all day long. Yan Hanbei was just friends with Panula, so how could he really implicate his friend? So for such a long time, Yan Hanbei was also sensible and never looked for Panula again. Even if the eldest prince told her himself after being drunk that the murder of the prince was instigated by the third prince. But as soon as he stepped into the third prince's residence today, Yan Hanbei felt that his worldview had been refreshed. Look at the unique scenery of this mansion, the exquisitely carved verandas, and the chattering and laughing servants. This is what Pan Yu said would happen if the third prince was also implicated. Looking at Fan Swinning, who was exquisitely dressed and smiling like a flower, Yan Hanbei suddenly felt so strange. In the past, Fan Swinning would secretly send her letters every now and then, telling her about her experiences. It is precisely because of this that Yan Hanbei would complain again and again for Fan Swinning. But since what happened to Yan Hanbei? Fan Swinning can be said to have disappeared from her world. If she hadn't seen Fan Swinning standing here without incident today, she would have thought that Fan Swinning had vanished from the world. This is her good sister. This is the friendship that she has always maintained with all her heart. Seriously. Not worth mentioning. Now without Fan Kinjao opening his mouth, Yan Hanbei started laughing at his own stupidity. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 587. Chapter 587 Liveliness and tea are the best match. The bitterness in Yan Hanbei's heart is naturally incomprehensible to others. Fan Swinning and Pan Yulu, who were blocked, had no time to understand what Yan Hanbei was thinking. Now they are thinking about one thing tacitly. How did Fan Kinjao and Yan Hanbei get together? This kind of thing is more unacceptable than the sky falling. Fan Kinjao was quite satisfied with the expressions of Pan Yulu and Fan Swinning. It was difficult for her to send the message to Yan Hanbei in time, and her efforts were indeed in vain. Pathology pays attention to the integration and restraint of each other. The same is true for being a human being. Excluding completely hostile positions, how can there be eternal enemies? But I'm afraid Fan Swinning and Pan Yulu don't understand this truth. Otherwise, the two people now would not be standing in a row in a daze. Pan Yulu finally got closer to Yan Hanbei. After the stiffness, she took the initiative to come over with a smile. Hanbei, why do you have time to come here? Originally, I thought I would have time to see you in a few days, but now it's a coincidence. Yan Hanbei also laughed when he heard this. The third prince's concubine has a high position and has to live pampered in this beautiful mansion all day long. How can I dare to bother the third prince's concubine to visit her in person? The tough tone and the complete incomprehension of roundabout words were still the same as in Pan Yulu's memory. But Pan Yulu used to watch Yan Hanbei criticize others like this, but now she uses it on herself. It's really sour and refreshing. Just in front of Fan Kinjao and Fan Swinning, Pan Yulu still wanted to put things right. Hanbei, you misunderstood, actually. However, Yan Hanbei didn't intend to give her this opportunity at all. He avoided Pan Yulu's extended hand and said without changing his expression, the third prince and concubine is a titled person. It's not appropriate to call me by my maiden name. You should call me Yan. Pan Yulu. Can't help it. You have to endure it. Fan Swinning looked at Pan Yulu's ugly face, and her own face was not that good looking either. She had known for a long time that Pan Yulu had a good relationship with Yan Hanbei, and Yan Hanbei had often mentioned it in her heart. But now Yan Hanbei can say such merciless words to his childhood playmate, but what about her? Fan Swinning did not dare to talk to Yan Hanbei, but she was also afraid that Yan Hanbei would take the initiative to find trouble. This feeling of fearing the wolf before and the tiger behind was driving her crazy. The most terrible thing is that Yan Hanbei looked over here. Fan Swinning. Almost bravely, Fan Swinning showed a soft smile and said, Ms. Yan. Yan Hanbei looked at Fan Swinning's hypocritical face, feeling extremely sick in his heart, and his tone became harsher. I used to hear that Miss Fan is a reserved and reasonable person, and she is not willing to stick to the world. I don't know that Miss Fan is now the third party is the prince's aunt so comfortable. Fan Swinning's face turned blue, her breath stuck in her throat and she almost fainted on the spot. She knew that Yan Hanbei couldn't say anything nice, but she didn't expect Yan Hanbei to be so cruel. Even though the current Yan Hanbei was demoted to a commoner with the eldest prince, he was once the eldest prince's concubine. But what about looking at her again? But she became a humble concubine. Yan Hanbei was just pressing her face to the ground and rubbing it. The most hateful thing is that Fan Swinning has no power to resist. Pan Yula quietly looked at Fan Swinning's face like a vegetable leaf, feeling both comfortable and suspicious at the same time. She didn't remember Yan Hanbei said that he knew Fan Swinning. The atmosphere in the main hall was full of strange depression. Even the servants serving on the side lowered their heads and did not dare to show off their dignity. Seeing Yan Hanbei stuck in place with a demon-like pestle, Pan Yulu and Fan Swinning were so stiff that they wished they could dig a hole and escape and disappear. In the past, how much they liked to see Yan Hanbei having trouble with Fan Kinjao. How troubled they are now. Fan Kinjao, who was already sitting on the flower bench, watched coldly. When the maid came in with hot tea, she reached out to take it and tasted it gently on her lips. The finest Sicien spring smells fresh and elegant, and looks green in color. After one sip, the fragrance lingers on the teeth and cheeks, and if you taste it carefully, it will be astringent and produce fluid. Fan Kinjao had the honor to smell this tea in the Yu Palace in his previous life. Concubine Yu at that time even looked at her timidly standing next to Fan Swinning, knocking that this tea was a tribute from another country. Only Yu Palace in the entire palace received the emperor's reward. Fan Kinjao remembered that Fan Swinning drank very carefully and happily at that time. Afterwards, Fan Swinning tempted her, saying that as long as she could get more for the third prince, she would also be favored by the imperial concubine. Now thinking about the past scenes in detail, Fan Kinjao felt that he was really stupid. In fact, Fan Swinning had hooked up with Bailey Rongs at that time, but in order to please her so-called mother-in-law's attention, she had a completely distorted mentality and did all the unscrupulous things. After 2 lifetimes, Fan Kinjao felt like smiling when he tasted this tea again. Pan Yulu's eyes widened when she saw the old Fan Kinjao was there. Are you still in the mood to drink tea? Fan Kinjao is certainly in the mood. She is not the one being abused today. Watching the excitement is the same as listening to a book, and tea is a perfect match. Pan Yulu. She finally saw that Fan Kinjao had no good intentions at all when he came today. And all of this is Fan Swinning's good deeds. If Fan Swinning hadn't posted a message to Fan Kinjao in the name of the third prince, how would Yan Hanbei have the chance to step into the third prince's house? Thinking about this, Pan Yulu became even more disgusted when she saw Fan Swinning's expression. Fan Swinning just wanted to bring Fan Kinjao to support the scene. How could she have thought that Fan Kinjao would bring Yan Hanbei over? Yan Hanbei looked at the expressions of Pan Yulu and Fan Swinning, and his heart was so cold that he began to feel numb. This is what she has always considered her best friend. Result. That's it? Yan Hanbei suddenly remembered that he heard that something happened to the Sun family a few days ago. It was Fan Kinjao who helped the Sun family in the name of the princess. He not only cured the young lady of the Sun family, but also restored the Sun family's innocence. Think again of Han Jingchen, who has always been close to Fan Kinjao. So, not everyone flies alone when disaster strikes. All said and done, it was just that she was blind and recognized a thief as a friend. The crown princess and I have been in the house for a long time, and we haven't seen the third prince concubine say a few words. Is this how the third prince's mansion treats guests? Don't forget, third prince concubine, today your aunt is giving birth to the crown princess. If the post is spread, no one will dare to visit the third prince in the future. Of course Yan Hanbei cannot confront Fan Swinning head-on. Even if everything was instigated by Fan Swinning, wasn't she stupid before? Even though she had clearly seen the true colors of Fan Swinning and Pan Yulu, she couldn't let Fan Kinjao see the joke. The one who was so unlucky was Pan Yulu, who was held tightly by Yan Hanbei. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 588. Chapter 588. This is really a star-studded meeting. There were still servants in the mansion watching, and Pan Yulu had to hold on even if she was injured internally. Taking a deep breath, Pan Yulu put on a warm smile again. Mr. Yan is right, I was so happy to see my old friend that I forgot how to treat guests for a while, and now I'm about to. It's noon, I'll have someone prepare the meal. As soon as he finished speaking, Pan Yulu led the people out of the main hall as if she was running away. Seeing this, Fan Swinning cursed Pan Yulu for being cunning, and hurried out of the house on the pretext of changing her clothes. In the spacious main hall, only Fan Kinjao and Yan Hanbei were left. When things got to this point, Yan Hanbei no longer had any dignity in front of Fan Kinjao. He simply sat next to Fan Kinjao and said, "Are you happy to see the joke?" Fan Kinjao shook the teacup in his hand without changing his expression. "Your joke is not funny." Yan Hanbei didn't believe it at all. "Fan Kinjao, why do you have to pretend to be confused and pretend to be ignorant? Didn't you come to me today just to see my joke? I know that I am a joke now. People who have not experienced what you have gone through will not know how painful it is to have those things on your body that can become a joke, so what others think is always their business. If even you yourself regard your past experience as a joke, then you will really become the biggest joke." Yan Hanbei was stunned. Ever since the eldest prince's accident happened, everyone had stared at her with wide eyes and laughed at her. She also only cared about hating how others laughed at her, and completely forgot everything about other people's jokes. This was completely her history of blood and tears. Looking at Fan Kinjao again, Yan Hanbei felt heavy in his heart. Every time she fought with Fan Kinjao in the past, she was never her opponent. I thought Fan Kinjao was too cunning, but now I realized that Fan Kinjao is really ruthless. It was just like today, but just taking one step forward caused everyone who was her enemy to be struck by lightning to varying degrees. Seeing that Yan Hanbei was silent, Fan Kinjao put down the teacup in his hand and said, "Didn't you always suspect that I was the one who caused you to marry the eldest prince? It just so happens that you can return my innocence today. If you want to find out the truth, I am willing to accompany you to the end. This can be regarded as repaying my invitation to you today." In fact, Fan Kinjao has never hated Yan Hanbei. Fan Kinjao just thinks she is too stupid. Yan Hanbei said, "You don't need to feel that you owe me anything." Fan Kinjao shook his head, "I just don't have the habit of bullying disabled people." Yan Hanbei, talking to you can really make someone choke to death. The reason why Yan Hanbei is standing here today is because he really wants the truth. But now looking at the pampered Pan Yulu and the newlywed Fan Swinning, she felt that it was no longer important. Everything is right in front of her, even if she doesn't want to believe Fan Kinjao's words. Suddenly there were footsteps in the yard. Fan Kinjao and Yan Hanbei were stunned when they saw the reputation. The 8th prince's concubine and the 2nd prince's concubine were led in through the door by the maid. As soon as she saw Fan Kinjao, the 8th prince's concubine quickly walked over with a smile. "The princess is really here." Not to be outdone, the 2nd prince followed behind and nodded to Fan Kinjao, "Crown princess." Fan Kinjao stood up and looked at the two of them and said, "Why are you here too?" Compared to the restraint of the 2nd prince and concubine, the 8th prince and concubine are much more familiar with Fan Kinjao. After all, they are people who have fought several battles together, and the revolutionary friendship is indestructible. "I heard that the crown princess came to the 3rd prince's mansion, so I followed her over. Anyway, I am idle in the mansion, so I might as well come over and join the fun with the crown princess." After Fan Kinjao heard this, what else could he do? Don't understand? Although I don't know where the 8th princess heard the news, the intention of supporting her should not be too obvious. The 2nd prince's concubine on the side looked at the familiarity between the 8th prince's concubine and the crown prince, and stood there awkwardly with a smile on her face. She actually didn't want to come. But it's impossible not to come. The second prince said that the emperor attaches great importance to the prince's return to the city, and even the third prince ignored him for this reason. Under such a situation, the crown princess will naturally have a rising tide. Now that she heard that the eighth prince's concubine was coming to accompany the crown princess, she had to come with her even if she was unwilling. Yan Hanbei saw that the eighth prince and concubine had sat down next to Fan Qinjiao, and pointed to the chair next to him to the second prince and concubine. The second princess smiled faintly, "Thank you." Yan Hanbei said calmly, "Call whatever you want." The second princess is such a smart person, she just pursed her lips and smiled and didn't speak at all. The eighth princess sat on the other side of Fan Qinjiao, looking at the eldest princess not far away and softly approving. The prince and the prime minister are still capable of supporting a boat in their belly. I am afraid I will never be able to learn from this generosity. Meeting. Fan Qinjiao smiled faintly but did not tell the reason. Even if Yan Hanbei was no longer a thing before, now that she has found someone, she must ensure everything is taken care of. Yan Hanbei listened carefully for a long time and felt somewhat warm in his heart when he saw that Fan Qinjiao didn't mention anything about her. Unexpectedly, at the end, the most unexpected person would give her a touch of warmth. Seeing that Fan Qinjiao remained silent, the eighth prince's concubine cleverly changed the subject and said, "The weather is getting colder and colder. When we go to the palace for the banquet at the end of the year, it will be the time to suffer again. It is a royal rule that during festivals and New Year's, the royal daughter-in-law must enter the palace to celebrate together. It seems to be a privilege of high status, but in fact, only you understand the feeling of waiting in the palace in the cold wind." Fan Qinjiao said, "The rules are the same. Don't you have to complain." The eighth princess sighed, "The crown princess is lucky. She only needs to pay her respects to the queen and then wait for the banquet to begin. It's not like the rest of us who have to go to other palaces after paying our respects to the queen. Go pay your respects to the mother-in-law. It feels like going to the market, it makes me sad just thinking about it." Fan Qinjiao added, "Then it would be better for you to stay in Fenji Palace." The eighth prince's concubine quickly shook her head, "I'm not as lucky as the princess." Looking at the eccentric and truth-telling manner of the eighth prince's concubine, Fan Qinjiao couldn't stop laughing. "I've rarely heard from the eighth prince recently. Are you and the eighth prince still on good terms?" Hearing what his grandfather said, Bailey Fengming regained the emperor's attention, and ministers from all factions in the court were ready to make a move. Not to mention Bailey Rongs, who could not sit still. Even the second prince and his party were like ants on a hot pot. But there was no movement from the eighth prince's side. If it were anyone else, Fan Qinjiao would only think that he was thinking of joining Bailey Fengming. But the same thing applies to the eighth prince. Fan Qinjiao had every reason to believe that the eighth prince wanted to roll up his sleeves and go it alone. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 589. Chapter 589, Scandal about the fifth prince. How could the eighth prince and concubine not understand the temptation in Fan Qinjiao's words? It's just that ever since the eighth prince found out that concubine Jiangshu and she were both crown princesses, he has been keeping a cold war with them. During this period of time, both concubine Jiangshu and the eighth prince's concubine have almost lost their ability to express their sincerity. But what's the result? The eighth prince simply took the path of isolation. Hide away from concubine Jiangshu when you enter the palace, and avoid the eighth prince concubine when you return home. Now when I think of the eighth prince who looks like a steel clapper, the eighth prince's concubine has a severe headache. It's okay not to mention her mallet. The emperor now attaches great importance to the prince, and even the third prince, who has always been favored, feels the crisis. Let alone the eighth prince, he was sent directly to the official post by the emperor. To put it bluntly, you are responsible for collecting things and delivering letters to the royal family. Don't we realize that our current situation is not good? Why do we always want to do something big and shocking? Fan Kinjao looked at the eighth prince's headache and said with a faint smile, the eighth prince is a bit stubborn, but the more such a person is, the easier it is to persuade him. If this method doesn't work, just hit the snake within an inch of its length. If you try another method and try it a few more times, you will always find his weakness. The crown princess is right, I will go to the palace to visit my mother tomorrow. The eighth prince didn't expect this. Regardless of whether she wanted to know where the eighth prince's weakness was, she still had to ask concubine Jiangshu. Fan Kinjao smiled and stopped talking when he saw that the eighth prince had made an idea. The eighth prince's concubine seemed to have thought of something. She got closer to Fan Kinjao and said, I don't know if the princess has heard that the fifth prince is not very peaceful recently. Fifth prince? Bailey Lingyu? Fan Kinjao raised his eyebrows and motioned for the eighth prince to continue. There are some rumors circulating in the main city. It seems that the fifth prince has fallen in love with a lady from a certain family. This matter has also been brought to the emperor. For this reason, the emperor specially talked to the fifth prince. After all, he is just a lady. If the fifth prince is all I want is a marriage certificate from the emperor. Speaking of this, the eighth prince's voice lowered even lower, but I heard that the fifth prince didn't seem to admit this matter, and even had a big fuss with the emperor in the imperial study. The emperor used to dote on him. The fifth prince is because the fifth prince is the most independent of the princes, but now the emperor's thoughts are all on the prince, so he can't care about the fifth prince. I heard that the fifth prince has been ordered by the emperor to be confined in the mansion to reflect on his past mistakes. Fan Kinjao really didn't know about this matter. Do you know whose daughter she is? The eighth princess shook her head, I haven't heard of that. Fan Kinjao frowned slightly, and the more he thought about it, the more strange he felt. In Ziliang, it is normal for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. The fifth prince is a prince, and he has never been married. It would be reasonable if he really fell in love with a lady from a certain family. And with the temperament of the fifth prince, if this matter really happened, he would not hide it. After all, it is not illegal to have a wife. To take a step back, even if the rumors are just rumors. The fifth prince only needs to explain it to the emperor, so there is no need to offend the emperor. Normally speaking, the current emperor is preoccupied with immortality and even avoids the always partial Bailey wrongs. How can he still be in the mood to care about the marriage of the fifth prince? But the emperor is not just in charge. It seems that the hand is still stretched out quite long. Otherwise, how could he be so angry that he would restrain the fifth prince? It was impossible for Fan Kinjao to ignore the fifth prince's affairs, but now in order to be able to block the so-called immortal merchants as soon as possible, the emperor had already set up informants and secret posts in the imperial city. If she sent someone to inquire about the news at this time, she would only I am afraid that I will fall into the eyes of the emperor. Although, Fan Kinjao's starting point was to find out what happened to the fifth prince. But if her power falls into the eyes of the emperor because of this, she will become a hidden danger sooner or later. Check, definitely check. But how to check? I will help you get this done, Yan Hanbei suddenly spoke. Fan Kinjao was stunned for a moment, then turned to look at Yan Hanbei. He would be lying if he said he wasn't surprised. Yan Hanbei met Fan Kinjao's surprised gaze and smiled bitterly, you don't like to owe others favors, and I don't like it either. There is not much she can do now, but precisely because no one cares about it, it is more convenient to find out the information. But if Fan Kinjao doesn't believe her, this will cause trouble for you. Hearing Fan Kinjao's affirmative reply, this time it was Yan Hanbei's turn to be surprised, do you believe me? Fan Kinjao laughed after hearing this, why not? In the past, she and Yan Hanbei stood against each other because Yan Hanbei was bewitched. But looking at the current situation, Yan Hanbei already knows the so-called truth. In this way, the hostile stance between the two no longer exists. Besides, it's just a matter of getting some news. Even if Yan Hanbei persists, what can Fan Qinjiao lose? Fan Qinjiao does not feel that it is his own fault for being able to see a person clearly because of a small incident. Yan Hanbei felt that he should say something, but he moved his mouth but couldn't say a word at all. This time, she really felt ashamed of herself. As for Fan Qinjiao, who can take things up and let them go, she boasts that she can't do it. It turns out that the reason why he has been unable to win is not Fan Qinjiao's luck. It is Fan Qinjiao who is really strong. It was Pan Yula who was having a headache in the backyard when he heard that the 8th and 2nd princesses were also here, and it was like a bolt from the blue. Yan Hanbei and Fan Qinjiao were already an eyesore, but now there are two more. Is this going to be a banquet in the third prince's mansion? K. Ren has already entered the door, and Pan Yula couldn't really drive him away except for being so angry that she smashed several teacups one after another. Fan Swinning, who also heard the news, was not much better. What are you two doing here? Don't you know that today is the third prince's happy day? Fan Swinning looked at her gloomy face in the bronze mirror, and her heart became more and more clogged. She is full of resentment now. How can she still look like a newlywed bride? I heard that the 2nd and 8th princes came here for the prince. After entering, they asked the concierge where the prince was, not where the third prince was. It was Qiun who was serving Fan Swinning. They came from Fan Mansion with him, so they were helping Fan Swinning. It's Fan Qinjiao again. Fan Swinning squeezed the bulletin yao she was playing with in her hand, suddenly raised her hand and inserted the sharp tip into the dressing table in front of her. Qiun was startled and hurriedly said, "Auntie, be careful. If you hurt yourself, how can you get married at night?" Fan Swinning raised her lips in concern. On the happy day, the third prince is still in the palace and has not returned. How does he look like he wants to marry me? The fact that the third prince has not returned in the palace must be Concubine Yu's idea. But if the third prince himself didn't want to come back, how could Concubine Yu really tie him down? The more Fan Swinning thought about it, the angrier she became, and her eyes became more sinister and menacing. She knew that the third prince disliked her because of her body, but for whom did she give everything in the first place? In the dream, he clearly loved her so much that he even killed Fan Qinjiao for her. Why does everything look different when you open your eyes? Actually, I think it's just right that the third prince is not here. Qiun, who was standing behind, said in a low voice. Fan Swinning came back to her senses and looked at the green clouds behind her through the bronze mirror in front of her. What do you mean? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 590. Chapter 590. It's exciting just to look at it. Qiun first looked back and saw no one around, then stepped forward and whispered in Fan Swinning's ear, "Men like weak women. Today, my aunt posted a message for the crown princess, but the arrival of the others has nothing to do with my aunt, so even if the third prince asks about it afterwards, as long as my aunt explains it to the third prince, not only will the third prince not blame my aunt, but he will also feel sorry for her suffering." Fan Swinning's heart trembled as she listened to Qiun's words. In the dream, the third prince always loved her very much, but she had forgotten that the reason why the third prince loved her so much was because she was beautiful and weak enough. But after what happened in the palace, she was already so angry that she had forgotten everything else. It was because she was dull and forgot the most important reason. Lunch is ready. The third prince and concubine sent Aunt Fan to the flower hall outside the door. The maid's urging sounded. The viciousness in Fan Swinning's eyes gradually calmed down, and the corners of her lips raised a vague arc. She seemed to know what to do. Facing the urging from the maid outside the door, Fan Swinning was not in a hurry. She ruthlessly took off her pink wedding dress, which was not so gorgeous, and put on a pure white dress. Then she asked Kweun to shake the red hairpin on her head and even take off all the earrings. Fan Swinning had a charming face to begin with, but now without any embellishment, she looked even more weak. Even if Kweun standing aside saw her like this, he couldn't help but feel pity for her. Fan Swinning looked at the expression on Kweun's face, smiled proudly, and then stepped out of the door. At the fork to the front yard, Panula was waiting impatiently. As a result, she saw Fan Swinning coming gracefully like a lotus emerging from the mud but not stained. Looking at the face that was quite similar to Fan Kinjao, Panula frowned. "You are not afraid of being unlucky when you dress like this on your big day, but aren't you afraid that the third prince will be unlucky with you?" Fan Swinning listened to this scolding that seemed to be looking for trouble. Instead of being angry, she lowered her head softly and said, "The third prince is teaching you a lesson, but I think that my sister has a noble status and coming to visit me today is condescending. I don't dare to steal my sister's spotlight anymore." Panula. Is it possible to be possessed by a ghost in broad daylight? Otherwise, why has even the tone of voice changed? However, Panula thought about it carefully. Fan Swinning was dressed like this. Once the third prince came back and asked about it, even if there was a mistake, it would be Fan Swinning and Fan Kinjao's fault. What does it have to do with her? Thinking like this, Panula didn't stop her and walked toward the front hall with Fan Swinning. At this time, in the front hall, Yan Hanbei said something that made the second and eighth princesses laugh. They didn't know that the eldest princess, who always spoke straightforwardly, could be so interesting. Yan Hanbei has been in such a state of decline that she no longer has any heirs to talk about. Seeing that the eighth and second princesses were chatting with her sincerely, she also had something to say. Now seeing the two of them smiling from ear to ear, Yan Hanbei himself started laughing too. To be honest, she didn't know how long it had been since she smiled like this. The eighth princess pulled Fan Kinjao and smiled and said, "I was wondering why the princess would bring the eldest prince concubine here with her, but I didn't know that the princess had a unique vision, and I guess she had already known that the eldest prince concubine was an interesting person." Hearing this, Yan Hanbei smiled and shook his head. "There is no need to call it that, Fan Kinjao interrupted her before she could finish her words. "The emperor demoted the eldest prince to a commoner, but the title of the eldest prince was not taken away at the same time. The eldest prince is still the eldest prince, so how come the eldest prince's concubine is not the eldest princess?" Yan Hanbei was stunned. Fan Kinjao looked at her and said, "The royal family is not a gate where we can enter and exit whenever we want." With just one word, we brought along several people present, successfully resolving Yan Hanbei's embarrassment. At this time, Yan Hanbei no longer wanted to inherit Fan Kinjao's affection. The eighth prince's concubine was not that surprised when she saw Yan Hanbei's eyes softening. The crown princess's methods are not comparable to ordinary people, otherwise her mother-in-law would not praise the crown princess every time they meet. On the other hand, the second prince's concubine was extremely shocked. "I have always known that the crown princess has great medical skills, but I didn't expect that the crown princess's conduct in life is even more sophisticated." Fortunately, she heard the news and came with the eighth prince's concubine today. If she offended the princess with her intelligence, she might not even be able to find a coffin in her death. If the current conditions did not allow it, the second prince and concubine would have really wanted to light 3 incense sticks on the spot and pray that the second prince would not become an enemy of the prince. When Panula and Fan Swinning entered the door, they saw such an extremely harmonious scene. Everyone was talking and laughing with Fan Kinjao as the center, and their happy appearance was really, "It's so dazzling." Even though Panula and Fan Swinning were prepared, they were still greatly stimulated by this scene. Who would have thought that the third prince's residence would one day become Fan Kinjao's home court? The bustle of the main hall made Pan Yulu and Fan Swinning look so out of place when they just entered. Pan Yulu originally wanted to wait for someone to see her before she spoke again, but her waist hurt from standing and no one noticed her presence. Like this, Pan Yulu felt that if it continued like this, she might not be able to speak even if she stood there until dark. At her wit's end, she could only take the initiative with an embarrassed smile and said, "I heard that the 8th and 2nd prince's concubines were also here, so I quickly finished what I was doing and came over, for fear of neglecting the 2nd and 8th prince's concubines, but I didn't expect it to be me. What is this nonsense? Can it be any more obvious to complain that the crown princess is stealing the limelight?" The 2nd princess smiled silently and said nothing. She was just a middleman, and there was no need to hurt the harmony between either party. The 8th prince's concubine had already stood in line, and she naturally wanted to help Fan Kinjao at this time. The 2nd prince's concubine and I saw the crown prince and the eldest prince's concubine when we entered the door. Could it be that according to the 3rd prince's wish, we all have to wait for the 3rd prince's concubine? Can't the princess speak until she arrives? At this time in the past, there was no need for Pan Yulu to speak, as Yan Hanbading would help. But now, the person who once stood in front of Pan Yulu is sitting next to Fan Kinjao. Pan Yulu felt uncomfortable with such a huge difference, and her words were a bit stiff. Why would the 8th prince's words be so biased? I didn't mean that. I just envy the princess who has such thousands of people wherever she goes. Attention is the same even in the 3rd prince's mansion. Those who don't know what they say think that Fan Kinjao and Bailey Rongs have something to do with each other. Of course, the 8th prince's concubine would not be stupid enough to follow these words, so she simply brought up another topic and asked on her own, "This is interesting. Does the 3rd prince's concubine think that the prince's status is not as good as before she has been married? Is the 3rd prince's concubine? Or does the 3rd prince's concubine think that the prince's concubine is not qualified to step into the 3rd prince's mansion? If that is the case, wouldn't it mean that all of us here are trying to outdo the 3rd prince?" Pan Yu showed up and asked 3 questions about the soul thrown by the 8th prince's concubine. Her face turned blue. "Did you take some medicine?" She just said one sentence, but why did she defend Fan Kinjao like this? End of this chapter.